The Westbrook family boardroom hadn't changed in 30 years. Same mahogany table, same leather chairs, same portrait of my grandfather hanging on the wall with that stern expression that seemed to judge every decision made in this room. Today, that judgment felt particularly heavy. Look at these numbers. My sister Sarah pushed the financial reports across the table. The complex is operating at 60% capacity. Maintenance costs are soaring. Dad needs to step down before everything collapses. I watched our father, Thomas Westbrook, founder of Westbrook Industries, as he stared out the window at the sprawling business complex that had been his life's work. 6 buildings, 30 acres, once the crown jewel of the city's industrial district. Now, according to my sister, a failing enterprise. Marcus, Dad turned to me. You've been quiet. What's your take? I adjusted my tie, buying time. The truth was complicated. While they saw declining numbers, I saw potential. While they planned retirement and liquidation, I'd spent 2 years executing a different plan entirely. I think we need to consider all options. I said carefully. The complex has good bones. Sarah rolled her eyes. Good bones. This isn't one of your restoration projects, Marcus. This is business. Hard numbers. That was always Sarah's way. Direct, aggressive, focused solely on immediate profit. She'd learned from the best, spending 10 years at cutthroat investment firms before returning home to save the family business. The numbers tell a story. I agreed, but maybe not the whole story. My phone buzzed, a message from my lawyer. Ownership transfer complete. All 6 buildings now legally under Phoenix Capital Holdings. I allowed myself a small smile. Phoenix Capital, my company. Built quietly over 5 years while my family thought I was just managing small-scale property renovations. I've already spoken with several buyers. Sarah continued. We could sell the complex, invest the money properly. Dad could retire comfortably. Dad's shoulders tensed. I knew what he was thinking. This complex wasn't just property, it was his legacy. He'd built it from nothing, transformed an abandoned industrial zone into a thriving business center. At least, it had been thriving until Sarah's modernization efforts began driving out long-term tenants in favor of short-term profits. The pension fund, Dad said quietly. What about our employees? Sarah waved dismissively. The sale would cover basic obligations. Times change, Dad. We can't keep running things like it's 1980. I opened my laptop, pretending to review the reports while actually checking the final ownership documents. Everything was in order. Through a series of carefully structured deals and shell companies, I'd acquired controlling interest in every building. Not even our family's lawyers had caught on. What about the Wilson contract? I asked, knowing the answer. Terminated, Sarah said proudly. Their lease was below market rate. They'd been here 20 years. And now they're gone. That's business. Wilson Manufacturing had been one of Dad's first tenants. 3 generations of Wilsons had operated from Building C, employing over 50 local workers. Sarah had doubled their rent last month, forcing them out. What she didn't know was that I'd already helped Wilson secure new space in Building E, under a long-term lease through one of my shell companies. Their employees would keep their jobs, and the Wilson family business would survive. I've scheduled a meeting tomorrow, Sarah announced. Potential buyers, major development group. Dad's face fell. I knew this was killing him. Watching his life's work being dismantled by his own daughter. What time? I asked, already knowing. My assistant had intercepted the email. 10 a.m. Don't be late. I nodded, thinking about the other meeting scheduled for 9 a.m. The one with all the complex's tenants, where they'd learn about their new landlord and the real plans for Westbrook Complex's future. If you'll excuse me, I stood gathering my papers. I have some calls to make. Sarah barely looked up, already focused on her next presentation. Dad caught my eye, and for a moment I saw a glimmer of hope there. He'd always said I understood the heart of the business, not just the numbers. Leaving the boardroom, I walked through the complex's main building. Everything here had a story. The worn marble in the lobby, imported by my grandfather. The Art Deco lighting fixtures Dad had preserved during the 80s renovation. The community bulletin board, still displaying notices for local events and business promotions. My phone buzzed again. Another message, this time from my operations director. All set for tomorrow. Tenants confirmed for 9 a.m. meeting. Legal team standing by. I'd spent 2 years preparing for this moment. While Sarah saw a declining property value, I'd seen opportunity. While she focused on quarterly profits, I'd built relationships with every tenant, understanding their needs, their challenges, their potential. In my private office, a modest space in Building B, that Sarah often mocked as beneath a Westbrook, I reviewed the documents that would reshape everything tomorrow. The space was deliberately understated, helping maintain my cover as the family's underachieving son, who just handled maintenance issues. My real office, the headquarters of Phoenix Capital Holdings, occupied the top floor of a downtown high-rise. But this room had served its purpose, letting me stay close to the complex's daily operations while executing my plan. A knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. "Come in." Mike Wilson entered, third generation of Wilson Manufacturing, now technically my tenant though he didn't know it yet. "Got a minute, Marcus?" "Always." I gestured to a chair. "How's the new space working out?" "Better than we hoped." He settled into the seat. "But listen, some of the other tenants are worried. Rumors about tomorrow's meeting." I held up a hand. "Tell everyone to be at the conference center at 9 a.m. Trust me." Mike nodded slowly. He'd known me since we were kids, back when our fathers worked together to build this complex into something special. "Your sister's been showing the buildings to developers, talking about highest and best use, whatever that means." "It means she sees buildings, not businesses," I replied. "Numbers, not people. Your father built this place for people." Mike said quietly, "Remember when he used to host those summer barbecues for all the tenants? Kids playing in the courtyard, families getting to know each other." I smiled, remembering. Dad had understood that a business complex could be more than just real estate. It could be a community. My phone buzzed. Sarah's name on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. "Big changes coming," I told Mike, "but not the kind Sarah's planning. Just make sure everyone's there at 9. After he left, I played Sarah's voicemail. "Marcus, I need the maintenance records for the last 5 years. The buyers want to review everything tomorrow. Don't screw this up." Little did she know, I'd been preparing those records meticulously, along with something else, detailed plans for modernizing the complex while preserving its character and community. Plans that Phoenix Capital had spent millions developing. I walked to the window. Looking out over the complex, Sarah saw declining occupancy. I saw opportunity. Where she planned to demolish, I planned to renovate. Where she saw outdated businesses, I saw established community anchors ready for strategic expansion. My phone buzzed again. This time a secure message from my Phoenix Capital team. "Final presentations ready. Legal documents prepared. Security arranged. Tomorrow would be interesting." I spent the next hour reviewing every detail of the plan I'd built over 2 years. Phase 1, acquire the complex through carefully structured purchases, using shell companies to avoid detection. Status, complete as of today. Phase 2, develop comprehensive modernization plans that preserved existing businesses while attracting new ones. Status, ready for presentation. Phase 3, reveal ownership at strategic moment to prevent Sarah's liquidation plan. Status, scheduled for tomorrow, 9 a.m. A light knock interrupted my review. Dad stood in the doorway, looking older than his 65 years. "Got a minute, son?" "Always." I cleared some papers from a chair. "What's on your mind?" He settled into the seat heavily. "Your sister, she means well. She sees problems that need fixing." "She sees problems." I agreed. "But her solutions might be worse than the issues." Dad nodded slowly. "Wilson Manufacturing found new space. Building E. I heard funny thing. Sarah tried to contact the new owner to buy them out. Couldn't reach them." I kept my expression neutral. "Maybe they're not interested in selling." "Maybe." He studied me carefully. "You've been busy these past couple years. Lots of late nights. Lots of meetings. Someone has to handle the day-to-day operations." He smiled slightly. "You know, your grandfather used to say there are two types of business people. Those who build things up, and those who tear things down to build something else. Always wondered which type you'd be. Before I could respond, Sarah burst in without knocking. There you are, Dad. The buyers want to meet tonight. Dinner at La Maison. Dad's shoulders slumped slightly. Tonight? I had plans. Cancel them. This is important. She turned to me. You too, Marcus. Try to wear something appropriate. After she left, Dad stood slowly. Guess I better go change. Dad, I called as he reached the door. Remember what Grandpa said about builders and destroyers. Watch carefully tomorrow. He gave me a curious look but said nothing. The dinner at La Maison was exactly what I expected. Sarah dominated the conversation, pitching her vision to the developers. Complete demolition. Modern mixed-use complex, maximizing shareholder value. I watched Dad's face as she detailed plans to tear down buildings he'd spent his life maintaining. The developers nodded enthusiastically, already seeing dollar signs. Of course, Sarah was saying, we'll need to handle the existing tenants, some lease termination costs. What about their businesses? Dad interrupted. Their employees. One of the developers waved dismissively. Market forces. Can't stop progress. I checked my phone under the table. Another message from my team. Wilson and others confirmed for 9 a.m. Media advisory prepared. Sarah caught me looking at my phone. Marcus, are those maintenance records ready? Everything's prepared for tomorrow, I said truthfully. The rest of dinner passed in a blur of development jargon and profit projections. I barely touched my food, mentally reviewing tomorrow's sequence of events. Back home, in my apartment's home office, I made final preparations. The wall displayed photos of the complex through the years. Grand opening in 1980, summer barbecues in the 90s, community events that had made this place more than just buildings. Another photo caught my eye. Me at 12, helping Dad fix the courtyard fountain. Always maintain what matters. He told me that day. Buildings, relationships, community, they all need care. My phone buzzed. A message from Sarah. Don't be late tomorrow. 10 a.m. sharp. Bring all maintenance records. I smiled, sending a quick reply. Wouldn't miss it. Then I reviewed tomorrow's schedule one last time. 8:30 a.m. Phoenix Capital team arrives. 9 a.m. Reveal new ownership. 9:45 a.m. Media announcement. 10 a.m. Sarah's meeting with developers. 10:01 a.m. Everything changes. A final message came in from my lawyer. All documents recorded. Ownership transfer complete and public as of midnight. I walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Sarah was probably rehearsing her presentation to the developers. Dad was likely sitting in his study, wondering if his life's work would survive tomorrow. Neither of them knew that at midnight, Phoenix Capital Holdings had officially become their landlord. Neither suspected that the failing business complex was about to become the centerpiece of a new vision for community-focused development. Morning came too quickly and not soon enough. I arrived at the complex at 7 a.m., watching my team quietly set up in the conference center. Security was discreetly positioned. Media representatives began gathering in the lobby. At 8:30, tenants started arriving. Mike Wilson nodded to me as he entered. Others followed. Small business owners, startup founders, people whose livelihoods depended on decisions made today. At 8:55, I saw Sarah's car pull into her reserved space. She headed straight for the main building, not even glancing at the gathering crowd. 8:59. My phone buzzed one last time. Everything ready. 9 a.m. I stepped to the podium. Good morning, I began. Thank you all for coming early. I know there's been uncertainty about the complex's future. Today that changes. The room grew quiet as I continued. 2 years ago, I started forming a company called Phoenix Capital Holdings. Through careful planning and strategic acquisition, Phoenix has purchased the entire Westbrook business complex. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I saw Mike Wilson's eyes widen with understanding. Some of you have heard about plans to demolish these buildings, to force out existing tenants. Those plans are no longer relevant. As the new owner, Phoenix Capital, my company, has different plans. I clicked through presentation slides, showing renovation plans, community spaces, modernization that preserved character. We're not destroying what works. We're building on it, improving it, growing it. The mood in the room shifted from concern to cautious optimism as I detailed lease guarantees, renovation schedules, and expansion opportunities. This complex was built on the idea that business is about more than just profits. It's about community, relationships, legacy. That's what we're preserving and enhancing. As I concluded, the room erupted in applause. Through the conference room windows, I could see Sarah arriving at the main building, developers in tow. "If you'll excuse me," I smiled. "I have another meeting to attend." Walking to the main building, I passed reporters already broadcasting the news. Sarah met me in the lobby, face flushed with anger. "What's going on? Why are there reporters? Why was there a meeting I didn't know about?" "Let's discuss it in the boardroom," I suggested. "The developers should hear this too." Upstairs, Dad was already in his usual seat, looking puzzled but somehow hopeful. The developers sat nervously, clearly having heard something about the morning's announcement. Sarah started her presentation, but I interrupted gently. "Before we continue, there's something you should know. The complex isn't for sale." "What?" Sarah spun toward me. "Of course it is. We're selling to optimize. Phoenix Capital Holdings purchased the complex," I said quietly. "All of it. The sale is complete, recorded, and public as of midnight." The room went silent. Sarah's presentation slides still glowed on the screen, showing demolition plans that would never happen. "Phoenix Capital," she whispered. That's your company." I nodded, sliding documents across the table. "Full ownership. All buildings. The developers can verify with their legal team." Dad picked up the papers, reading carefully. A slow smile spread across his face. "You didn't fail," he said softly. "You built something." "Built something." Sarah's voice rose. "He destroyed our plans, our opportunity." "No." Dad stood, still holding the documents. "He preserved what matters while building something better, just like his grandfather would have done." The developers quietly excused themselves, leaving our family alone in the boardroom. Sarah collapsed into a chair, stunned. "Why?" she asked finally. "Why not just tell us? Would you have listened?" I asked. "Would you have seen past the numbers to understand what this place really means?" Dad walked to the window, looking out at the complex, his life's work, now under his son's protection. "What happens now?" he asked. I joined him at the window. "Now we build something better. Together if you're willing. There's always room for smart financial management, Sarah. Just not at the expense of what matters." The portrait of my grandfather seemed to smile slightly, as our family began a new chapter, not in destruction, but in building something greater. The next morning, I arrived at my office in Building B, before sunrise. The complex felt different now. The weight of secrecy lifted, replaced by the heavier responsibility of transformation. My phone hadn't stopped buzzing since yesterday's announcement. "Your sister's here," my assistant Peter messaged. In the main lobby, I checked the security feed. Sarah stood in the marble-floored entrance, looking lost in the building she'd been ready to demolish. She wore her usual power suit, but something was different. The aggressive confidence replaced by uncertainty. "Send her up." Shh. While waiting, I reviewed the morning's updates. Our announcement had already impacted the local business community. 3 potential tenants had contacted us about available spaces. Wilson Manufacturing's employees were celebrating their secured future. The local paper's business section featured our renovation plans. Dad had called twice, leaving thoughtful voicemails about seeing the bigger picture. Sarah entered without knocking. "Some habits die hard." "Nice office," she said, looking around the modest space. "Very functional." "That's the point." I gestured to a chair. "Everything here serves a purpose." She sat stiffly, placing a thick folder on my desk. "I brought the financial projections you asked for, though I suppose they're irrelevant now. Actually, they're crucial." I opened the folder. "Your analysis is excellent, Sarah. You see problems clearly. We just differ on solutions." Her expression softened
Slightly.
The complex is operating at 60% capacity. True, but look at these tenant profiles. I pulled out my own reports. The occupied spaces house businesses with deep community roots, stable employment, and growth potential. The vacant 40% isn't failure. It's opportunity. For the next hour, we dove into numbers. Sarah's sharp financial mind began engaging with my vision, seeing how preserving existing tenants while strategically adding new ones could yield better returns than demolition and reconstruction. But the maintenance costs, she argued. The older buildings, come with me, I interrupted, standing. Let me show you something. We took the service elevator to Building C's basement. Sarah wrinkled her nose at the industrial surrounding. Last year, I explained, we installed a state-of-the-art energy management system down here, reduced operating costs by 23%. I pointed to new equipment. Modern efficiency doesn't always mean new construction. Moving through the complex, I showed her other improvements hidden beneath the historic facade: updated wiring, smart building controls, eco-friendly adaptations that preserved character while cutting costs. You did all this secretly. Not secretly, quietly. While everyone focused on quarterly reports, we were building long-term sustainability. In Building E, we watched Wilson Manufacturing's operations through observation windows. Machines hummed, workers moved with purpose, a family business thrived. They're expanding, I noted, adding a new product line next month, hiring 15 more people. Sarah was quiet, watching. Finally she asked, why didn't you tell me about Phoenix Capital, about your plans? Would you have listened? I turned to face her. 2 years ago, I tried presenting alternative development strategies. You called them naive and outdated. She flinched, remembering. I was wrong. No, you were half right. The complex needed change, but change doesn't always mean destruction. My phone buzzed. Dad had arrived for our morning meeting. Time to test whether family bonds could be rebuilt as easily as buildings. In the renovated conference room, Dad studied the detailed plans, spread across the table. Sarah sat beside him, adding notes from her financial analysis. The courtyard redesign. Dad pointed to a rendering. It maintains the fountain, with modern water features added. I confirmed. Green space, public art, places for people to gather. The heart of the community, just like you intended. Sarah leaned forward. The retail spaces along the edge. If we adjust the layout, we could increase visibility, while preserving the historic storefronts. Exactly. I pulled up more drawings. Modern functionality behind classic facades. The best of both worlds. For the next 2 hours, we worked together like never before. Dad's deep knowledge of the complex, Sarah's financial acumen, my vision for the future, all flowing together into something greater than our individual perspectives. There's something else, I said finally. A proposal for both of you. They looked up expectantly. Phoenix Capital needs experienced leadership. Dad, your understanding of community-based business is invaluable. Sarah, your financial expertise could help us expand this model to other properties. You want us to work for you? Sarah asked incredulously. With me, I corrected. As equal partners in building something meaningful. Dad smiled, understanding. Not destroying to rebuild, but building on what matters. Sarah studied the plans again, seeing them with new eyes. These projected returns, they're better than my demolition proposal. And we'd be preserving jobs. Community nerd, the Westbrook legacy. Dad added softly, but evolved for a new era. My phone buzzed again. The contractors had arrived to begin the first phase of renovation. Through the window, I could see trucks pulling up, workers gathering, the complex stirring with new energy. Well, I asked, are you in? Dad reached for a pen. Show me where to sign. Sarah hesitated just a moment longer. On one condition. Name it. I want to lead the expansion strategy. Other struggling complexes. Other communities that need this approach. I smiled. Already in the plans. Welcome aboard, sis. As we finalized the details, I watched my family transform. Dad energized by new purpose, Sarah's aggressive edge softening into strategic vision. The complex had been built on relationships, and now it was rebuilding them. That evening, after the contractors had gone, and the offices grew quiet, I found Dad sitting by the courtyard fountain. "Remember teaching me to maintain this?" I asked, sitting beside him. "Always maintain what matters," he quoted himself. "Never thought you'd apply that lesson quite like this. You taught me more than you realized." I looked around at the complex, our family's legacy, now entering a new chapter, about building things that last. The sunset painted the old buildings in warm light, making them look both venerable and vital. Tomorrow would bring more changes, more challenges, more opportunities to prove that preservation and progress could work together. But tonight, sitting with Dad by the fountain he taught me to care for, I knew we'd built something more important than buildings. We'd rebuilt our family's foundation. 6 months into the transformation, the Westbrook complex was buzzing with activity. Construction crews worked alongside existing businesses, carefully modernizing without disrupting. The courtyard fountain sparkled with new life, surrounded by emerging garden spaces and communal seating areas. I sat in my new office, still modest, but now occupying a corner space in Building A that better suited Phoenix Capital's headquarters. 3 monitors displayed various project updates, while a fourth showed live security feeds of the complex. Sarah burst in, tablet in hand. "We have a situation. When don't we?" I minimized the renovation schedules I'd been reviewing. "Harrington Tech is threatening to leave." She dropped into a chair. "They're saying the construction noise is disrupting their operations." Harrington Tech occupied the entire 5th floor of Building Deck, one of our largest tenants and a key part of our technology corridor vision. "Have you talked to Jim Harrington?" "He's not returning calls." Sarah scrolled through emails. "Their lease is up in 3 months. We can't afford to lose them." "Actually, we can." I pulled up a different file. "But we won't." Dad chose that moment to join us, carrying coffee for everyone. 6 months of active involvement had energized him. He looked younger, more engaged. "Harrington?" he asked, catching the tail end of our conversation. "Jim's son got married last weekend." Sarah and I exchanged looks. This was why we needed Dad's involvement. He knew the human side of every business in the complex. "Wedding gift?" I asked. Dad nodded. "Traditional Chinese tea set. His wife's family is from Shanghai." I reached for my phone, sending a quick message to Peter. "Book the new conference space in Building Deck. Get Mrs. Chen from the tea shop to set up a traditional ceremony. Today if possible." Sarah watched, understanding dawning. "You're not going to negotiate with spreadsheets, are you?" "Numbers matter," I replied, "but relationships matter more." 2 hours later, Jim Harrington stepped into our newly renovated conference space to find a traditional Chinese tea ceremony waiting. Mrs. Chen, whose shop had been in the complex for 20 years, presided with elegant expertise. "My mother-in-law would love this," Jim said softly, accepting a cup. While Mrs. Chen served tea, we discussed Harrington Tech's concerns. The construction schedule could be adjusted. Sound dampening technology could be installed. Most importantly, we shared our vision for the technology corridor, with Harrington Tech as its anchor tenant. "We're not just preserving the complex," I explained. "We're growing it thoughtfully. Your company's part of that vision." By the end of the ceremony, Jim wasn't just staying, he was expanding, taking another half floor for a new development team. "That's how Dad built this place," Sarah mused later, reviewing the new lease terms. "One relationship at a time." Speaking of building, I pulled up another file. The Wilson expansion is ahead of schedule. Want to see something interesting? We headed to Building E, where the Wilson manufacturing floor had been transformed. New equipment hummed alongside restored vintage machinery. Workers moved between stations with purpose. Their numbers nearly doubled since we'd prevented their eviction. Mike Wilson met us by the main floor entrance. Perfect timing. "We're about to test the new line." For the next hour we watched as Wilson's team demonstrated their latest innovation, a hybrid manufacturing process that combined traditional craftsmanship with cutting-edge technology. "This is what I meant," I told Sarah as we left. "Evolution, not destruction." They've increased productivity by 40% while maintaining quality and adding jobs. And their rent payments are ahead of schedule, she added, ever the financial mind. Plus, 3 of their suppliers are asking about space in Building F. Back in my office, Dad waited with more updates. The community garden on the roof of Building C was thriving, providing produce for the complex's restaurants. The new tech incubator space in Building Beck had a waiting list. The historic facade restoration was drawing architectural tourism. But, he added seriously, we have another challenge. When don't we? Sarah and I said simultaneously. Brighton Development is building a modern complex 3 blocks away. They're targeting our tenants with aggressive incentives. Ah, Brighton Development. Sarah's former allies in the planned demolition. Now our primary competitors. Show me their offers, Sarah said, snapping into analysis mode. While she reviewed Brighton's incentive packages, I pulled up our community impact reports. The numbers told an interesting story. Look at this. I pointed to the screen. Our tenants' employee retention rates are 40% higher than market average. Healthcare costs are lower due to our wellness programs. Productivity is up since we added childcare services. And the farmers market in the courtyard, Dad added, is drawing weekend foot traffic that's boosting retail revenues. Sarah looked up from Brighton's offers. They can't replicate this. They're building space, but we've built community. Exactly. I opened another file, which is why we're going to help them. Help them. Sarah looked skeptical. Brighton's project is going to happen regardless. Instead of competing, what if we collaborated? Extended our community model. I showed them the preliminary plans, connecting the developments via a green corridor, sharing amenities, creating a larger innovation district. Turn competitors into partners. Dad nodded approvingly, just like in the old days. The next week, I met with Brighton's CEO. Instead of a traditional office meeting, I invited him to lunch at Maria's Cafe, a family-owned restaurant that had been in our complex for 15 years. As Maria herself served her famous paella, I laid out our vision for collaboration. The numbers were compelling, but it was the energy of the busy cafe, the obvious community bonds that made the real impression. This isn't just about buildings, I explained. It's about creating something greater than the sum of its parts. 2 hours and 3 courses later, we had the framework of an agreement. Brighton would adjust their plans to complement rather than compete with our complex. We would share certain amenities and coordinate tenant mix to create synergy rather than competition. Back at the office, Sarah was already running projections on the collaboration. If this works, we could expand the model to other developments. Already ahead of you, I pulled out proposals for 3 other projects. Phoenix Capital's next phase. Dad studied the plans. You're not just preserving one complex anymore. You're changing how development works. We are, I corrected. All of us. That evening, as the sun set over the complex, I walked the grounds with Dad and Sarah. Construction crews were finishing for the day. The courtyard was filled with tenants and visitors enjoying the new cafe seating. Through the windows, we could see businesses still operating, innovations being created, community happening. Remember when you thought this place was failing? I asked Sarah. She nodded, watching a group of tech workers collaborate over coffee near the fountain. I saw what was broken. You saw what could be built. That's the real legacy, Dad said quietly. Not just maintaining what matters, but growing it into something better. A message buzzed on my phone. The first draft of Phoenix Capital's expanded community development model was ready for review. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove that progress doesn't require destruction. But tonight, walking through the complex with my family, seeing our shared vision taking shape, I knew we'd built something more valuable than real estate. We built a blueprint for sustainable growth, for community-centered development, for preserving what matters while embracing what comes next. The Westbrook complex wasn't just surviving, it was evolving, growing, thriving, and so was the family that had built it. 1 year after the revelation of Phoenix Capital's ownership, I stood on the rooftop garden of Building A, watching the sun rise over what media now called the Westbrook model. The complex had become a case study in sustainable urban development, attracting visitors from around the world. Sarah joined me, 2 coffee cups in hand. The Singapore developers are here early. How many this month? I accepted the coffee. Fourth group. Everyone wants to understand how we balance preservation with growth. She smiled. Remember when you were just the family's maintenance guy? Below us the complex was awakening. Mrs. Chen opening her tea shop. Wilson Manufacturing's early shift arriving. Tech startups lights flickering on in Building B. A living ecosystem we'd not just preserved but enhanced. Board meeting in an hour. Sarah reminded me. Dad's bringing the final numbers. The boardroom had changed. The stern portrait of our grandfather now shared wall space with photos of community events, innovative projects, and the people who made the complex thrive. Dad entered with an energy that belied his age, carrying his trademark leather portfolio. Ready for this? The numbers exceeded even Sarah's optimistic projections. Occupancy 98%, tenant retention 95%, revenue up 60%, year-over-year community engagement, off-the-charts employee satisfaction across tenant businesses, 87%. But here's the real victory. Dad pointed to a different metric. Average tenant business growth, 40%. We're not just providing space, we're helping businesses thrive. Sarah, now fully converted to our community-centered approach, pulled up additional data. 3 more developers want to license our model. Phoenix Capital could expand nationally. Internationally, I corrected, showing the Singapore proposal. But we grow thoughtfully, remember, like you grew this. Dad gestured to the complex around us. One relationship at a time. A knock interrupted us. Mike Wilson, now heading a manufacturing innovation center that occupied 2 floors. Sorry to interrupt, he grinned, but you might want to see this. We followed him to Building E's main floor. There, gathered around a new prototype, stood a group of engineering students from the local university, part of our education partnership program. They've designed something interesting, Mike explained proudly, combining our traditional manufacturing methods with AI optimization. The students demonstrated their project, a perfect synthesis of old and new tradition and innovation, exactly what the complex had become. This is what we really built, I told Dad and Sarah as we watched. Not just buildings, possibilities. Later that afternoon, I found myself back in my old Building B office. I kept it as a reminder, still using it occasionally for tenant meetings. Sarah found me there, reviewing old photos, feeling nostalgic, remembering when you thought this place was worthless. I was wrong. She sat down. But you were wrong too. I raised an eyebrow. You thought you had to do it alone, she explained. Secretly buying everything, planning everything. Look at what we've accomplished together this past year. She was right. The complex had flourished, not just because of my vision, but because of our combined strengths. Sarah's financial acumen, Dad's relationship wisdom, my belief in preservation and progress working together. My phone buzzed. The Singapore developers were ready for their tour. But first, one more stop. The courtyard fountain sparkled in the afternoon sun, surrounded by people enjoying the community space we'd created. Dad was already there, talking with tenants, embodying the spirit that had built this place. Ready to show them our model? Sarah asked. Our legacy, Dad corrected. As we walked the complex with the developers, explaining our approach, I saw it through fresh eyes. The historic facades housing cutting-edge businesses, the community spaces fostering innovation, the carefully balanced mix of preservation and progress. The buildings are important, I told our visitors, but they're just the foundation. The real value is in the ecosystem we've created. We ended the tour where it had all started. My old bookshop, now expanded into a cultural center that hosted everything from tech meetups to children's reading programs. A year ago, Sarah told the developers, I thought this place needed to be demolished to have value. Now I understand. Real value isn't about destroying and replacing. It's about building on what matters. Dad squeezed my shoulder. Sometimes the best investments aren't about buying low and selling high. They're about believing in potential others can't see. As the sun set over the complex, casting long shadows through the historic buildings now humming with modern life, I thought about legacy, not just our families, but the legacy we were creating for others. A model showing that growth doesn't require destruction. that progress can preserve what matters. The Westbrook complex stood as proof that with vision, patience, and understanding, you could build something greater than anyone imagined, not by tearing down the past, but by building thoughtfully toward the future. The end.